the Lawrence Municipal Airport. Winds from the southeast at 3. Not much in the way of a wind chill because of that. But otherwise, hopefully the sun is going to make an appearance and stick around for the rest of the day soon enough. It is Tuesday, and this is Tuesday. It's first time in a while getting back to Real Estate Live and Local from the Lawrence Board of Realtors. Kind of had a holiday time off, but I'm happy to welcome David Dunn here from Stevens Real Estate. Good morning.
Good morning. How are you?
And also, I'm doing fine. And Stan Sanger from Sanger Inspection Services. Is that what?
Sanger Home Inspections.
Home Inspections, yeah, is here. And that's going to be kind of our topic of conversation this morning is we're going to be talking a little bit about home inspections. We've talked about that before, but it's one of those things that certainly, first of all, not everybody was listening the last time we talked, but more importantly, we could probably do a dozen shows on it and never finish all the things that you can go over with regard to getting home inspections.
Yeah, certainly. When you're thinking about selling your home, obviously now is a great time to start thinking about those things if you haven't started already. But preparing your home to be purchased and eventually be inspected by somebody like Stan, it's just good to have the knowledge of what you need to be looking for, what the buyer might be looking for, and then ultimately what somebody like Stan may be looking at when he does the home inspection. So all important topics of conversation.
Yeah, and it's something that a lot of people don't think of as being on both sides of the equation. You know, everybody knows that when you go buy a house, you're going to have it inspected, especially if you're going to get a mortgage. They're going to require an inspection, but even if you didn't, you'd be kind of silly to go buy an as-is home without having somebody at least check and make sure that there's not. But from the seller's standpoint, it's not necessarily a bad idea to know where you stand in the first place.
Certainly, when you're going to sell your car, for example, you want to know kind of what's wrong with it before you go to sell it, right? If there's an oil leak and you know about it, you're going to want to tell the buyer that or have it fixed beforehand. So
or get out the duct tape. No.
Yeah, right. I'm sure you've seen something like that in your line of work.
Yep.
But, just to kind of run that comparison, it's the same type of thing. You want to make sure that when you're disclosing things about your home for somebody to potentially buy, that they kind of know what they're getting. So it's important that you know what you're selling as well. So these things kind of go hand in hand, and while not everybody would do a pre-inspection when selling their home, certainly they'd want to know the age of the roof and the age of the furnace and so on, so that they can notify the buyer of that. So all those things go into just being prepared and having your home in good shape and ready to show and clean and tidy, and the tidiness actually goes along with probably some of the things that you've experienced trying to help a buyer with an inspection. Being able to navigate the home and get around. So
Yep.
those are all things that you can do to prepare.
Okay, well, you're talking about preparation, and the old sort of general thought process with regard to selling homes is, people like to put their houses on the market in the springtime or maybe late spring, try to get summer buying and so on. Is that like still a deal, or is there like a time of year that is the time of year you should start thinking about this if you're thinking about selling your home?
Yeah, I mean, certainly time goes into everything. If you're moving for a job, or if
sometimes you don't have the choice.
Yeah, sometimes you don't have the choice. Is there ever a bad time to sell your home? No, probably not. Because if a home is on the market, then it somebody will probably find it and want to purchase it. We do find that the springtime market is the hottest market here in Lawrence specifically, and elsewhere. So it's just about people being cooped up and ready to get outside, and we see kind of some ebbs and flows with the weather. But once spring starts to roll around, people are starting to put their house on the market, and buyers are starting to look. So if you're thinking about selling during the springtime market, now's the time to start thinking about preparing your home to be on the market.
Bring up is that for Stan here is that when people are, if they might want to put their home up in spring, this would probably be the time to start thinking about what you are going to need to do to put it on the market, because you don't want to just call a realtor on, whatever, April 1st and say, here, put it up. I mean, there's a certain amount of preparation time.
Exactly, there is.
And not only do you want to have that preparation time just to get you out there and inspect or at least know where you're starting, but you also want to have a little bit of time to do something about maybe whatever you might find.
Yes. Homeowners can do a lot that doesn't cost them anything to prepare their home. They need to literally walk around their house and just look at things. Is there trees growing out of the gutters? Clean the gutters out. Clean the dryer vent exterior out to make sure it's clean. Just if the house looks junky outside, buyers are going to assume the house is ignored inside also, and that's a bad look.
So that's one of the things that you, as an inspector, might even notice when you first go out to look at a house.
Yes,
Are there other things that you that are kind of like tip-offs in your head? I mean, you have a checklist and things that I'm sure you go through, but as an experienced inspector, I'm sure that there are things that just jump out at you as well.
Yes, trees growing from gutters is one thing that really sets the tone for this house has not been taken care of. And it's inside, walk around your house, make sure all the lights turn on, all the bulbs are burned out, light bulbs are changed. Have your furnace serviced. Make sure everything works like it's supposed to. Make sure the home is safe for the new buyers, because a lot of families will be looking at your home and they want to make sure it's safe for their children.
So, for example, when you're doing inspections, you're going to get into areas of the house that people don't traffic a whole lot.
Yes.
Mm-hmm.
Is it a good idea for the homeowner to kind of go there? Because if you go in, let's say to the basement where the water heater is, and you see that there are all sorts of, boxes and debris and stuff like that around it, you might, think, well, this is probably not all that well maintained.
Right, because ideally you should have your furnace and air conditioner serviced every year, and if there's boxes piled around it, that tells me it hasn't been done. Therefore, they're not going to work efficiently, and that could be a possible issue. Also, if there's boxes piled against the hot water heater, that hot water heater is a source of fire, and it could possibly spread to the boxes.
It's good insulation. What are you talking about? It's also a pretty good indication they haven't been draining it once a year either, for that matter. By the way, if you got if you got boxes with 6 inches of dust on them, there's a pretty good chance that that hasn't happened either. When when a seller is getting ready to sort of present his home, is there maybe something that is? I mean, a lot of what we're talking about are potentially, if you have an inspector come in, you might find something that's little, you might find something that's big, but is there something that's like just a little thing that homeowners should do to get ready for when they're getting ready to sell?
Yeah, I think so, and this is where your real estate agent is going to really help you by being another set of eyes. Obviously, things become furniture to you if you live in the home long enough. An agent or even a friend or a family member could come in and point some things out that might be good to handle before your home goes on the market. Any small deferred maintenance items, light bulbs are pretty big, like Stan mentioned. The furnace filter is something, obviously. Even missing face plates on outlets is something that's a very cheap fix and doesn't take much time for you to do. Broken windows, broken storm windows even are something that are torn that could be replaced pretty easily. So those are the types of things that somebody would probably be able to do pretty easily before the house going on the market. And the other things really have to do with the presentation that we talked about outside. We're looking for a clean and tidy yard and maybe some mulch in a flower bed, and if it's springtime, it doesn't hurt to have a few colorful flowers out front, right? Hiding trash cans and bikes. And I think that really the most important thing that we just want to present the house that the buyer can envision them living in. So if a buyer walks in and sees a lot of clutter outside or inside, it's harder for them to imagine that may not be enough space for them to live there. If somebody else is cluttered, then they may be cluttered too. So just getting in that buyer mentality, if you're a seller, and how would I want to see a house? How would I want to walk into a house, and what would I want it to look like? Those are the types of questions that a seller can answer.
I make sure I tell my home sellers also that when I finish the pre-sale inspection, I'm going to give them a report that outlines all the issues I find. If they would put that on the kitchen counter with the good, bad, and ugly, but yet beside it have a receipt that shows, oh, the inspector found a bad hot water heater. Here's my receipt that shows I replaced the hot water heater. That's going to make purchasers feel really good about the house because problems have been identified but taken care of.
Yeah, the fact that a potential buyer can see that it has been inspected and that those issues are either being addressed by the home owner that is the seller, or has been taken into account with whatever it is, because that's another area from a realtor standpoint. You can, talk to a potential homeowner about what projects are a good idea to deal with yourself, and what projects are a good idea to let the new, like for example, obviously you can get a paint job on your house or make it look good or do this, that, and the other, but there are certain things that you might want to let the new owner deal with himself, as opposed to making the decision for him how you're going to deal with that. Maybe you have an older furnace and you could go out and buy a 96% high efficiency one, or replace it with an 80% one. But now you're making the decision for him, as opposed to knocking $5,000 off of it and say, put in whatever you want.
Yeah, certainly there are times where that comes into play. I think exterior, interior house paint is probably one of those things, and most of them probably fall under their cosmetic category, in which obviously if something's really bad, if you've got carpet torn up all over the place, and your expectation is that you want to get top dollar and you want a buyer to be happy, because at the end of the day we're trying to marry a seller and a buyer together and everybody feel good about the transaction. That's at least the goal. You may want to address carpet, but at the same time a carpet allowance is an option for the buyer to be able to choose their style or their color of carpet. Same with interior paint. A lot of times a buyer is going to come in and purchase a house and probably
repaint
a lot of stuff anyway. Now, if the walls need to be addressed, if there are deficiencies within, on the walls where you've hung big TVs or something of that nature, it's probably good that if those are going with the seller and going to be removed, let's take that stuff down and let's repair the wall and let's repaint it and have a fresh slate for a buyer to work with. But yeah, there are items that certainly would need to be addressed by a seller, and also some that buyer may be just happy with doing themselves once they take ownership.
So it's always been a little bit of a pet peeve of mine, just in general, for the idea of selling a house, which I always find it ironic that you live in a house for 25, 30 years or whatever, and then fix it up right before you leave. And the new people get the new carpet and the fresh paint and the things that work, and you've just been living there all this time with things that were broken, and then you fix it up for somebody else to live in. I always found that, but
that's why it's a good idea not to ignore some of those maintenance items. So don't defer your maintenance items. Just take care of it while you're living there.
Well, speaking of pet peeves, are there any that you have for the public?
This is a great question. This is a great question.
Yes. So many times I get phone calls from home buyers that when I talk to them initially, I ask them if they have any issues with the home as they walk through it that they want me to pay attention to. And they'll say, yeah, there's water in the basement and I can't figure out where it's coming from. And I'll get to the home and the gutters are clogged, disconnected. They discharge right at the foundation where all the water's just gushing into the basement. the ground slopes toward the house, so all the rainwater goes in the basement, and they can't figure out where it's coming from. Well, it's pretty obvious. That's a little bit of a pet peeve, yeah.
Well, obvious to you.
Yeah. And also windows that won't open. They haven't been opened for 30 years. And that's one of the pre-sale items. You know, go around the house, make sure all the windows open.
And lock.
And lock. It's
Yeah.
not that hard, not that difficult.
Well, if they won't
And
open, you don't
especially
need
for
a lock.
bedrooms.
But you know, beyond that, even the screens to them too. I mean, I can't imagine there's anything that, from a cosmetic standpoint, would turn off a seller if he comes around and sees a house that's got a bunch of ripped screens, you know, or something like that. It would just, you know, and junk along the side of the house and things like that.
Yep.
So, all right, well, so if from a buyer's standpoint that are coming, and obviously you're going to do inspections for people that are looking to buy houses as well. What are the things that like a buyer should be okay with, and what are the things that should scare them off in terms of when they see a house and they get your inspection?
Number one item for buyers is the roof. They don't want to buy a house that they have to move into and immediately spend $5,000 to $7,000 for a roof. So that's probably my number one request. I'm concerned about the roof, or the age of the furnace and water heater. That is kind of scary to them also. Foundations that have bowed or shifted or displaced or settled, they're cracked. They're really afraid of that also. And unfortunately, you get homes that are built in the 1900s, late 1800s. You're going to get stone foundations. They're going to have cracks. That's just no way around it. Fortunately, a lot of times they're cracked, but they're not defective. That's just the way they are.
All right, well, that's Stan Sanger from Stanger Home Inspections, along with David Dunn with Stevens Real Estate. This has been Real Estate Live and Local every other Tuesday here on
right.
Radio for Grown-Ups. So we'll see you in a couple of weeks.
Appreciate it. Thanks
Fox
so much,
News
Joel.
coming